Welcome back to part 2 of the church circle video. In this video, we're going to learn how to map out an entire network of churches and diagnose the health. All right, welcome back. So before we get started, there is one verse I want you to go and read. It is 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. Go and read that and ask yourself one question. What did Paul want Timothy to do? How far did Paul want Timothy's work to spread? All right, great. You probably saw in 2 Timothy 2:2 that it goes from Paul to Timothy to faithful people to others. That's 4 generations of disciples. Now, what we're going to see here is 4 generations of churches or churches in groups. So, as you learned on the previous video, how to draw a church circle, what you're going to do is you're simply going to get a piece of paper and you're going to use that same tool, the church circle, to map out generations of churches. So you're going to put your church at the top of the piece of paper, and just like we talked before, if these elements are being practiced and taught inside of your church, you're going to put those elements inside the church circle. If your church identifies as a church, it's a solid line. If your church doesn't identify as a church, it would be a dashed line or a group. You put the number of attendees, the number of believers, the number of baptized at the top, and you put the date it was started, the location, and the leader at the bottom. After you draw your church, you're going to put arrows down to other circles that you draw. These are going to represent other churches or groups that your church has started. After you map out the other churches and groups that your church has started, then you can map out, if you have any, the churches and groups that these second generation churches have started, and so on and so forth. For example, here we see this church here at the top, the first generation church, has planted 2 churches and 1 group. These would be second generation. This church, the second generation church, has planted 2 more churches. These would be considered third generation churches. This church here has planted a 4th generation group. Now, you'll notice that some of these churches and groups have symbols on the outside. Just like we talked about in the previous video, if this church or group is not practicing these within the local church, if it's not being done or somebody else from another church is coming, then you would draw those symbols on the outside. So this again is just an example. From this generation map, we can see very clearly how to coach the leaders, not only in this church, but coaching the leaders downstream generationally. The point of a generation map is not to celebrate and brag and boast on what we are doing. The point of a generation map is to coach leaders downstream to continue to push toward the edge of lostness. The reason we want to see churches and disciples reproduce is because as more churches and disciples reproduce, lostness is impacted. If churches stop reproducing generationally, then lostness is not impacted, and we want to see lostness impacted until there's no place left. Use this generation mapping tool in an iron on iron, which you will learn in another video, when you gather your leaders together and coach them on how to continue to push for multiplication and generational growth into lost people and lost places. Thanks for watching. Take what you've learned today, apply it, and reproduce it until there's no place left.